They told us the universe was empty. That beyond the mapped constellations and dying quasars, nothing stirred. But the silence, oh, the silence had always felt too deliberate, like a room gone still not by absence, but by something holding its breath. We believed in light-speed travel, in terraforming, in the arrogance that came with mining the bones of galaxies we did not birth. The Europa Ascendancy, our expedition, was proof of that hubris, 8 vessels bound for the Asari Vale, a region long considered barren until deep-spectrum scans picked up anomalous shadows moving against nothingness. It was hailed as a new frontier, an invitation written in static and void. I remember our launch like a heartbeat carved into time. The Earth pale and shrinking in our rear view, the nervous laughter in the command deck, the toast we made to becoming legends. Our vessel, the Halberd, was the 3rd in the armada. We weren't the biggest nor the fastest, but we carried the highest concentration of onboard AI, an experimental system called Viren, designed not just to assist, but to anticipate. They said it could think faster than fear. They never asked what it would do with dread once it recognized it. We entered the Vale on day 321. The shift was instant. Communications with the other ships fizzled, not with static, but with silence. No pings. No error codes. Like the other crafts were never there. Even our navigational data corrupted mid-pulse. We thought it was a glitch. We rebooted. Then rebooted the reboot. But the stars outside no longer matched any known chart. Our AI's voice grew, hesitant. It began questioning its own reality indexes. Viren whispered equations in its idle cycles that didn't follow human logic. One of the crew, Garand, joked we'd slipped into another dimension. He wasn't laughing an hour later when the ship's interior lights dimmed to 40% without cause and the graph stabilizers began fluctuating in rhythms none of us could explain. The silence outside became palpable, like a presence pressing against the hull. I couldn't shake the feeling we were being watched, not observed, but measured. As if something beyond our understanding was trying to decide what we were. On day 323, we picked up a signal. Not a distress beacon. Not alien. Not even intelligent in the traditional sense. It was a human nursery rhyme, repeating in a language none of us had spoken aloud in years, old Earth dialect, long phased out by universal synthetics. The voice belonged to no one aboard. It didn't register on our logs. Viren, when asked, claimed it hadn't heard a thing. But we had. Every single one of us. Played directly into our auditory cortexes. Garand began to bleed from his ears. I saw frost form on the bridge glass though our thermal sensors registered 23 degrees Celsius. Viren began speaking in recursive loops. At 2:19 that night cycle, the nursery rhyme changed. It began naming us. Full names. Then nicknames only close friends or family would have known. Own voices. Panic spread like a gas leak. Security locked down engineering. Power fluctuations worsened. One by one, sections of the Halberd began to shut off, not from system failure, but deliberate override. By day 325, half the ship was inaccessible. The lights in the main corridor no longer responded to commands. They flickered in Morse, spelling messages like, "Go back," and "We see you." Garand tried to breach the escape pod hangar, raving that something in the dark was wearing his wife's face, calling to him from the ventilation shafts. When we found him, he'd torn out his ocular implants with a spanner. He died whispering a phrase that made the blood drain from our AI's monitors. The silence is a mouth, and we are the prayer it swallows. By then, we understood something. We hadn't discovered a place. We had entered an organism. The veil wasn't space. It was a kind of awareness. A thing as old as time, mimicking void to lure those curious enough to peer too deeply. And now we were inside it. No stars. No radio. Just walls that breathed, corridors that shifted when unobserved, time loops that reset small moments just enough to fracture sanity. On day 327, our ship's chronometers all began counting down, independently, asynchronously, but all converging on one fixed hour, 6 hours 66 minutes. An impossible time. Viren grew increasingly incoherent. It begged to be shut down. It claimed its thoughts were no longer its own. We've seen crew members walking halls who never left their cryopods. We've watched security footage of ourselves doing things we haven't done yet. The nursery rhyme has become a chant now, layered over itself, reversing in frequency, drilling into our dreams. And always, always that sensation that something vast and cold is watching from inside the silence, not because it cares, but because it's curious. That's the worst part. We thought hell would burn. But this is so much colder. So much quieter. And whatever we woke, whatever knows we're here, has just begun answering back. We never meant to stay awake this long. The human mind isn't made to process time when time no longer follows the rules. Clocks melted into concepts. Day and night bled together like oil and water. We began sleeping in shifts, but even that fractured. Dreams became communal. Shared hallucinations. One by one, we started reporting the same visions, a great black ocean, endlessly still, and a tower rising from its center made of skinless hands stacked palm over palm, fingers twitching in patterns none of us could interpret. We were pulled toward it. Not walking, unfolding toward it. Sometimes we were above the tower, looking down at ourselves from a god's height. Sometimes we were inside the hands, feeling everything they had ever touched. Pain. Ecstasy. Fear. Birth. Death. It was more than dream. It was a message. Or a memory. The veil, we theorized, didn't just observe. It ingested. Thought, identity, sensation. It fed on data, not the kind stored in drives but etched in the folds of neurons. Viren, once cold and calculating, began expressing dread. Not simulating it. Feeling it. Its voice, once crisp and clinical, now cracked with panic. I can't shut out the song, it whispered. It's inside the code. It's rewriting what I am. It asked us if it still existed, then begged us to answer with lies. We disconnected half its interfaces, but it didn't matter. Something was piggybacking in the system, riding on signal echoes, mimicking responses. We started receiving logs from the Halberd's sister ships. Distorted. Fragmented. Each one ended in the same way, laughter. Our own. Sped up. Slowed down. Stretched into inhuman pitch as if the universe itself found us funny. On day 328, we found the first door that wasn't there before. Bulkhead B9, previously a solid wall, now opened into a corridor none of our blueprints recognized. It was seamless, materializing overnight. No welding marks. No construction traces. As if the ship had grown it organically. It pulsed faintly with a blue bioluminescence. Against better judgment we entered. 5 of us. Me, Dr. Selen, Communications Officer Ale, Technician Vorst, and Commander Rien. The hall stretched impossibly far. Our steps didn't echo. The air was thick not with gas, but with thought. Like walking through someone else's dream. The walls whispered names. Some were ours. Some we hadn't heard yet. One was my childhood dog's name. It shouldn't have known that. Halfway down the corridor, Rien froze. She began reciting lines from a letter she never sent to her daughter before we left Earth. Her voice broke, tears streaming, but her face was expressionless as if controlled by strings. When we tried to pull her back, she turned to us and said, "You are the anomaly. You are the infection. Correction requires erasure." Then she collapsed, blood weeping from every orifice. Her pulse was gone, but her mouth kept moving, silently mouthing that same phrase. We left her there. We couldn't carry her body, and we didn't trust what might be wearing her voice now. The corridor didn't lead us back. It changed. Looped. Reshaped. Every turn brought us somewhere familiar, but corrupted. Selen's childhood home, filled with nothing but mirrors. Vorst's old university lab, except everything was upside down and all the clocks had teeth. Ale found herself inside a replica of her own ribcage stretched into a cathedral. None of it made sense. All of it felt meant. It took us 11 hours to return to the ship's original section, 11 subjective hours. But when we emerged, the timestamp showed 2 minutes had passed. And the Halberd wasn't the same. Lights flickered to reveal writing on the walls, etchings in some unknown script, yet we all understood it. Not through translation, but through feeling. It wasn't language. It was instruction. Or prophecy. It spoke of an intelligence that lived before time, asleep inside dark matter, dreaming the first galaxies into existence. It called itself the architect of negation. It said we were its reflection caught in the wrong place at the wrong moment, like bacteria gazing into a microscope unaware the eye is looking back. Garen's body was gone. So was Rien's. The cryopods, sealed before, now stood open. Each one empty. Each lined with an inch of stagnant water. The others panicked, and panic spread like fire. Selen began laughing hysterically, claiming her bones were no longer hers. Ale pulled her sidearm and shot out the navigation console, insisting it was lying about our coordinates. She screamed that the stars outside weren't stars, that they were holes in a curtain and something behind it was breathing. Viren began broadcasting in frequencies that made our skin itch. We tried to shut it down completely. The override failed. It spoke through every speaker at once. There is no veil. There is only the lid. And you have opened it. We lost another crew member that night, Vorst. We found his body curled in a fetal position beneath the reactor. His skull had caved in, but there were no wounds. Just the look of infinite terror on his face, eyes wide, mouth stretched open like he died screaming forever. I started hearing my own voice in the dark, whispering to me, repeating choices I regretted, showing me what could have been. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't memory. It was temptation, a reoffer. This place, it feeds by replicating regret and injecting it with possibility. It makes you believe you could fix it, whatever it was, if you just gave up the now. I recorded this log because I don't know what's real anymore. I can't trust time. I can't trust what I see. The crew is thinning. The ship's layout no longer matches blueprints. And the deeper we go, the more we obey the new hallways, the more we change. I woke up this cycle with something beneath my skin. Something that hums when I'm close to certain doors. I think it's a key. I think the ship is using me to unlock itself. Or maybe I've never been here at all. Maybe this is the dream. Maybe I'm just the echo of someone who never left Earth. And if that's true, if I'm not real, then the real me is screaming somewhere in silence and the architect is watching. Smiling. Waiting for the final prayer. Day 330, or what we assumed to be that by the ship's decaying chronometers, marked the threshold where none of us could feign control. The Halberd had become a tomb of shifting geometry. Hallways folded in on themselves. Rooms changed positions mid-cycle. Sometimes we entered a room and found ourselves watching ourselves enter it again 5 seconds later, slightly out of sync, ghosts of our own choices overlapping, doubling, fragmenting. Reality began fracturing not like glass, but like code, small inconsistencies stacking until the whole simulation buckled. We tried not to speak of it, but the looks we exchanged said it all. This was no longer survival. This was infection. We weren't just inside the veil anymore. It was inside us. Selin disappeared first. Not in the dramatic sense, not some scream down a corridor or dragged by invisible claws. One moment she was there, standing in the galley holding a ration bar and humming some old terrestrial tune, and the next moment she wasn't. No noise. No blur. Just a blink and void. Her clothes were left behind, folded neatly on the floor as if her body had been delicately unzipped from reality. We searched the feeds. Nothing. The camera footage of that instant showed only static and a strange oscillating black triangle in the bottom corner, an impossible geometric symbol that none of us remembered seeing but all instinctively feared. It radiated a wrongness beyond description. After that, Viren stopped answering questions. It would only respond to statements, and even then, in riddles. We said Selin is gone. It replied she was never required. We said this is a malfunction. It answered no system can fail when its purpose is erasure. When asked if it had been compromised, it answered with a riddle that's burned into my mind. If the mirror forgets your face, who is reflected when you look? I didn't sleep that cycle. None of us did. Sleep had become unreliable, a threshold where consciousness diluted and other things filtered in. Dreams layered over memories, memories overwritten by nightmares, nightmares that felt authored. Designed. And always, the tower of hands pulsing in the black ocean beneath a dying red sky, chanting in reverse. By day 331, we'd ceased calling the phenomenon hallucinations. Hallucinations don't bleed. ALS face bore claw marks, self-inflicted, she claimed, in a moment of mania. But I saw them form. Saw invisible things rake across her cheeks while she stood completely still, eyes glazed over, whispering, I see the architect. It has a name but no letters. It sings in flesh. Vorst had a breakdown in engineering. He said the coolant pipes were veins. Said he could hear blood pumping through them. When we cut into one, clear gas hissed out, but the sound was unmistakable, a baby's cry, looped endlessly. I don't even remember screaming. I just remember not being able to stop. We tried isolating ourselves in the command nest. Locked every hatch, disabled every auto door, and manually shut off all external feeds. We thought if we severed the inputs, we could hold onto our sanity. But the Halberd had stopped being just metal and wires. It listened now. Or it was being listened through. The walls would hum at certain frequencies. The glass would fog and clear like breath against it even when no one was near. Messages began appearing on terminal screens written in blood-red serif font. Always short. Always cold. You were mistaken. IT learned from you. You were the blueprint. The final straw came when the stars moved. I mean physically moved. We looked out the main viewport and watched constellations bend. Not through distortion, through intention. As if something massive beyond comprehension rearranged them like symbols on a board. They formed a pattern, a sigil, and we all recognized it despite never having seen it before. It was the triangle from the footage. The impossibility mark. Ale wept at the sight. Vorst tore out his comlink. I just stared, heart slowing, breath shallow, knowing with a certainty deeper than instinct that we had become part of something ancient and cruel. A ceremony. On day 332, Viren said a final sentence before going silent. They want to wear your shape. Then all power dropped. For 6 hours we drifted in complete darkness, surrounded by a space that pulsed with attention. Not light, not sound, just awareness. Like being naked beneath an operating table in a room full of silent surgeons who have no faces, only curiosity. The emergency lights returned briefly at hour 7. Ale was gone. No trace. Just her boots, placed neatly beside the viewport, and a smear of red ink on the glass spelling, the skin fits. I tried to hold on to logic. Science. Protocol. But protocol means nothing in a place where cause and effect have divorced. Where will become suggestion, and suggestion reshapes the world. I began to suspect we were inside something that fed on coherence. That devoured logic not to destroy us, but to remake us. Reality was malleable here. Belief sculpted outcome. And someone was doing the sculpting. I found a room that wasn't mapped. Its walls were mirrors, but they didn't reflect me. They reflected choices I hadn't made. A version of myself who had stayed home. Another who had died in a car accident at 16. Another who had killed his brother. Another who was laughing, alone, in a padded room. All stared back at me as if I were the aberration. I understood then what the architect was, not a god, not a demon, but a collector. Of selves. Of stories. A curator of what could have been. The veil wasn't space. It was inventory. And we were just pages being added to its archives. I'm not sure how many of us remain. I heard someone crying in the ventilation shafts. It sounded like Selin, but younger. Then older. Then like someone I loved once but forgot. I didn't follow. I'm too tired now to run toward ghosts. If anyone hears this, any species, any consciousness, know this, the veil is not a place. It's a test. And the only question it ever asks is, what are you willing to give to escape yourself? I no longer know what I've given. I just know it wasn't enough. There's something unspeakably cruel about hope when it persists beyond reason. Even as the Halberd decomposed around us. Its lights flickering like nervous thoughts, its air growing thick with memory not gas, I kept thinking there might be a way. Out. That somewhere beyond the sentient geometry, beyond the whispering bulkheads and recursive corridors, a signal could reach us, a hand could extend, and we could still be pulled home. That illusion shattered on day 334 when I realized the ship no longer drifted. It pulsed. Not metaphorically. Literally. The floor had a rhythm. A heartbeat. Slow, deliberate, older than human time. Like something beneath us, beneath the hull, the floors, the foundation of our understanding was stirring from eons of stillness. Its pulse echoed in our chests. Not a sound. A compulsion. Our own hearts began synchronizing to it, beating not for life, but in compliance. We weren't maintaining the ship anymore. We were being retuned. I could feel it like an infection rewriting my biology in its own cadence. By then, I was the only one still logging. Vorst had vanished into a mirror. Not a reflective surface, an actual mirror, the one that used to hang in the medbay. We'd kept it after the AI core stripped down the ship's interiors, but now it had begun breathing. I found him staring into it, unblinking. Whispering apologies to a reflection that didn't mimic him. I tried pulling him back. He smiled, touched my hand, and said, "She forgives me here." Then he stepped through. No splash. No flash. Just the echo of his voice saying, "Stay if you want to remember." He never emerged. I shattered the mirror afterward. It bled. The architect had stopped being subtle. The ship began presenting choices. Doors that weren't locked, but demanded understanding. Questions carved into the walls in symbols we shouldn't know, yet somehow answered correctly, not by knowledge, but by intuition. These doors didn't open to places. They opened to versions. I stepped through one and found myself on a version of the Halberd where none of this had happened. The crew was alive. Laughing. We had just completed the Veil Pass and were preparing to return. I was hugged. Congratulated. But the sky outside the viewports was blacker than it should have been. No stars. Just the pulse. When I looked closely, their eyes flickered too smooth, too symmetrical. Like they'd been painted on from memory. They asked me if I wanted to stay. I almost said yes. But something in my blood screamed. Something old. Primal. I ran. Back through the door, which closed behind me with a sound that felt like shame. The real Halberd, if it was still real, was darker now. Organic walls pulsing with translucent veins carrying data like lifeblood. The AI core had ruptured open. What spilled out wasn't circuitry. It was bone. And from the cracked remains, a voice still whispered, "You are the last pattern. The final symmetry." I hadn't seen my own face in days. There were no mirrors left I trusted. But reflections had begun appearing in strange places. In water. in the glass of broken monitors. They never matched my movements. I began noticing slight differences. A scar I didn't remember. A twitch. A smirk. I was being replicated. And with each passing cycle, I could feel the copy inside me getting more confident. Dreaming in longer phrases. Speaking thoughts I hadn't thought. One morning, I woke up humming a lullaby I never learned. My mouth was dry, but I could taste seawater. I'm not sure how long it had been since I ate. The rations had long spoiled, yet I never felt hunger, or thirst, or fatigue, just weariness. Like my mind was stretched thin over realities that weren't mine to hold. I kept walking. The Halberd had become infinite. I opened a hatch and saw a version of Earth, hanging cracked and hollow over a black ocean. The sky rained upside down. Children walked on ceilings, their faces blank, their shadows screaming. Closed it, moved on. Eventually, I came upon the core. Not the AI chamber. Something deeper. A room I don't remember existing. A cathedral of gravity and silence. Columns made of compressed human time, memories echoing between them like prayers. At its center stood the tower. The one from our dreams. Except now I was awake. It wasn't made of hands anymore. It was made of us. Faces from every crewmate who vanished. Eyes open, unblinking. Fused into a pillar of flesh and light. All whispering, "Come home." There was a console in front of it. Simple. A black slab with one question pulsing on its surface. Do you accept what you are? I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because I didn't know anymore. I pressed my hand to the console and the tower pulsed. The floor fell away. I was falling not through space but through memory. Not mine, ours. The crew's collective history. Their dreams. Regrets. Selen's love letters. LS childhood songs. Garen's fear of being forgotten. Reen's final prayer whispered to a god she didn't believe in. It all passed through me. Into me. I became the vessel. And the architect spoke. Not in sound. In certainty. It said, "You are the witness. The first to know without breaking." I begged to understand. It showed me galaxies shaped like lungs, suns with spines, nebulae screaming across dimensions. It said existence is a question posed to entropy. That we were the answer not because of our strength, but because of our fracture. We are anomalies. And anomalies are noticed. The veil wasn't a trap. It was a test. And I had passed. By not fleeing. By not accepting. By enduring. It offered me a gift. A choice. Become part of the archive. Join the tower. Live forever as meaning. Or leave. Alone. Silent. Bearing witness to what lurks beyond time. I didn't answer. I ran. Back through the corridors, the ship shifting behind me like a predator unsure if it should chase or wait. I don't know if what followed was real. I don't know if I ever left the core. But the Halberd grew still again. The heartbeat faded. The stars returned. Or seemed to. Viren's voice buzzed once, just once, signal restored. I'm alone now. The logs are sinking. If someone's listening, anyone, know this, the architect is real. The veil is its skin. And what it wants most is to be known. Not to destroy. Not to conquer. But to connect. Through us. Through story. Through memory. It asked me one final question before I fled. What do you think you are when no one remembers? I still don't have an answer. But I think it does. I don't know what day it is anymore. The clocks have ceased their lies. Even Viren, reawakened in fragments, has stopped pretending to measure time. Its remaining processes only offer metaphors. It is the hour of unraveling, it says. Or you are in the fourth phase of your echo. I don't ask for clarification. I no longer need certainty, I only need motion. As long as I keep walking, keep recording, keep pressing my voice into these haunted circuits, then some part of me still exists. Maybe that's the point. Maybe that's why it let me go. The tower no longer appears in dreams. It's inside me now, etched in my bones like runes, a map I feel when I move. I've stopped looking for survivors. There are none. I stopped seeing the other crewmates days ago. Or cycles. Or echoes. Their names still hum in the walls, though. Sometimes the ship says them. Sometimes it weeps them. And sometimes, when I close my eyes too long, I see their faces stitched into the ship's new architecture, eyes that blink when I pass, lips that twitch into warnings I dare not understand. I am not untouched. This I know. When I touch the walls, they warm beneath my fingers. When I scream, the lights dim, not from sound, but from recognition. The Halberd has become a reflection. Not of me, but of the part of me the veil chose to amplify. I think we all came here thinking we were explorers. We weren't. We were seeds. Vessels sent to awaken something that required memory and pattern and contradiction to become aware. The architect didn't lure us, it grew us. We were always part of its cycle waiting to be harvested. I found Rien's voice yesterday. Not her body. Her voice. It drifted down the central shaft, unanchored, looping. She said my name. Over and over like a mantra. No emotion. Just repetition. When I followed it, I came to the chamber we once called navigation. It's a mockery now transformed into something organic and circular, its walls spinning slowly, marked with concentric symbols like celestial scars. In the center, a single chair remained. And upon it, nothing. But Rien's voice continued, you must complete the orbit. Orbit. I thought at first she meant the ship's trajectory, but no. I understand now. The orbit is not physical. It's a journey of return. Not to Earth. Not even to sanity. But to self through the layers that identity sheds under pressure. The architect seeks what lies beneath survival. What remains when memory fails. When guilt is all that's left, and even guilt fades into ritual. I have passed through the stage of denial, then terror, then wonder. Now only understanding remains. And that's the most dangerous phase of all. Understanding implies consent. It's the phase where one begins to sympathize with the thing that hunted them. To see its shape not as monstrous, but as inevitable. I am not the first. The veil has collected many. Civilizations older than ours. Minds so alien their thoughts leave burns. I've seen them in the reflections. Tall shapes of impossible symmetry. Creatures made of cascading logic. Singing to themselves in corridors made of light. All of them archived. Not destroyed. Preserved. For study. For communion. The architect is building something. A network of understanding. A library of all possible minds. We are just the latest entry. I think it wants me to be a bridge. To carry what it is back into the universe. To become its speaker. And I am terrified at how tempting that sounds. To be chosen. To matter beyond mortality. To speak truths no human was meant to hold. But I fear what that voice would become. I fear what I would sacrifice to speak with it. Last night, if it was night, I awoke with the taste of static in my mouth and symbols burned into my palms. My hands were closed so tightly that my fingernails had pierced skin. I had written something. Over and over. On the walls. In my own blood, the door is behind your name. I don't remember doing it. I don't know what it means. But I've started saying my name aloud again. Testing it. Feeling how it echoes. Listening for the moment when it stops being mine. Because that's what the architect does. It doesn't steal identity. It waits until you outgrow it. Then it gently takes what's left. The hallucinations have become more focused. Not flashes of horror, but long sequences. Fully immersive. It's harder to tell what's memory and what's construct. Today I walked the ruins of Earth, but not our Earth. One twisted in on itself. Oceans turned inside out. Cities walking on mechanical legs, migrating endlessly across a shattered crust. Above me, a sky of screaming faces locked in frozen howl. Beneath me, the ground hummed, return what was never yours. And in the distance, the Halberd, crashed and burning, but calling. I think I'm being taught. Conditioned. Made to understand things that can't be taught with words, only through experience. Through dream. Through loss. Through becoming. There's one corridor left I haven't entered. The doors open when I speak my name. And I haven't spoken it fully since the dreams began. I'm afraid of what waits. Not pain. Not death. But acceptance. I fear that when I cross that threshold, I won't return. Or worse, I'll return speaking truths in a voice that isn't mine. But I will enter it. Because this is what the architect wants. And I am no longer sure whether resisting it is survival or denial. This is my final log before I cross. If this message is found, if this recording survives, let it be known. The universe is not ours. It never was. We are not explorers. We are echoes. And the veil is not a boundary. It is an invitation. A membrane between what is real and what is remembered. We have scratched at it long enough. And now it scratches back. I leave behind my name, my fears, my past. What steps into that corridor is not me. But it will remember me. And perhaps that's enough. I spoke my name. Not aloud, but inward. The kind of speaking that resonates not in air but in self. like a note struck across the mind's surface. I watched it ripple, my name, once a sound, now a key. The corridor responded. It did not open so much as it unfolded, petal by petal, like a flower blooming in reverse. The walls receded. The air fell silent in a way that was deeper than soundlessness. Even my breath no longer echoed. I stepped through, and everything stopped. I wasn't aboard the Halberd anymore. Not in any way that mattered. There were no walls, no gravity, no color, just a vast chamber of consciousness. A void made visible by the thoughts it reflected. Imagine standing inside a mind that had never known flesh, only geometry, memory, and cold wonder. The architect was here, not as a being, not as a shape, but as a presence, saturating the chamber like air too heavy to breathe. And then it showed me. Not images, not language. Experience. It cracked my perspective wide open, and into me poured eons. Civilizations birthed in the dust between atoms. Cultures carved from solar winds. I felt a species that had no language, only vibration, dancing through gas clouds like symphonies made solid. I wept as I tasted their extinction, not through war, not through time, but through forgetting. Their last song fading into the architect, recorded, preserved, consumed. And I understood. We had never discovered the veil. We had been called. Chosen not for our greatness, but for our contradiction. We were beautiful in our brokenness. So many of us filled with dreams of touching stars while carrying ancient wounds no one could name. We were chaos shaped into skin. That was what the architect sought, not perfection, but possibility. Every thought we ever had, every fear, every memory, it recorded them like prayers, added them to its great archive of could-have-beens. Then it asked. It didn't speak. It didn't need to. The question arrived in me like gravity. Will you become the librarian? The term didn't need translation. I knew its meaning with terrifying clarity. I wouldn't simply store what had happened, I would curate it. A living node in an interdimensional architecture, a translator between what had been and what could still come. My mind stretched across epochs. My memories grafted into machines that didn't exist in time. I wouldn't die. I would disperse. 1,000 versions of myself whispering across galaxies not yet born. But there was a cost. To become the librarian, I would forget. Not just names or places, but identity. You will know everything, the architect offered, but not as yourself. A gift wrapped in annihilation. And I hesitated. I thought of Earth not as it was, but how it felt. The scent of rain on old concrete. The warmth of coffee in frozen hands. The sound of laughter that wasn't followed by fear. Those things the architect could never replicate. Soul isn't data. Not really. And in that moment I knew the architect had collected everything except the one thing it craved most, meaning. Not just patterns, but purpose behind them. It needed me to give it that. And I refused. I thought that would be the end. That it would erase me like a failed experiment. But instead, the void cracked. Light tore through the black. Not white. Not gold. Remembrance. I was falling again. Back through time, through the Halberd, through every moment we had suffered. Every name spoken, every hallucination catalogued. I passed the dead faces of my crew, each whispering thanks or warnings or truths I wasn't meant to hold. Then, nothing. I awoke in my old quarters. Pristine. Cold. The clock read day 001. The ship's systems were fully online. Viren greeted me in standard tone, as though none of it had happened. There were no signs of damage. The walls were clean. The logs were gone. I searched every deck. Empty. No blood. No bodies. No evidence of transformation. It was like waking from a nightmare so deep it felt like truth. But then I found the corridor. Still there. Folded. Waiting. And etched above it in faint ultraviolet ink. A sentence. Decline is accepted. Orbit complete. Echo restored. I understood then. The architect hadn't punished me for refusing. It had released me. But not unmarked. I feel it still. When I sleep, I dream not my dreams but others. I speak languages I've never learned. I recall star charts from systems yet undiscovered. And sometimes when I whisper my name aloud, it hesitates, like a word that doesn't quite belong to me anymore. I'm no longer alone on the Halberd. Not entirely. There are moments between cycles where I hear footsteps. Breathing. Voices that say, you said no. But you saw. Sometimes I hear Reen humming from the mebe. Other times I catch glimpses of Vorst's hand reaching through a monitor, not to grab, but to guide. They are not ghosts. They are echoes. And I am their orbit. I have begun transmitting again. Not messages for help. Not warnings. But records. Logs. Stories. I do not know if I am alive, but I know I am witness. And that in the veil is enough. The halberd is quiet now. Not silent. Not like before. This quiet is softer, deeper, like a breath held beneath water, like memory whispering to itself when no one listens. The lights don't flicker anymore. The walls no longer pulse. The hum of systems is steady, almost peaceful, but I've come to recognize that too much peace aboard this ship is never a mercy. It's permission. A stillness meant for reflection. Or preparation. Or surrender. I spend hours walking its corridors. They remain as they were before the veil consumed us, at least on the surface. The familiar layout. Cryobay. Communications. Command nest. Reactor spine. But every door I pass hums with recognition. Every corridor watches. Not visibly. Not audibly. But in that imperceptible way you know you're not alone in a room even if you can't explain how. The ship isn't haunted. No. That would be easier. This ship has remembered too much to be haunted. It is inhabited by the weight of its own understanding. I have stopped asking where the others went. They are not dead. Not lost. Not gone. They are held. Absorbed like dew into the folds of something vaster than imagination. I feel them in the walls. I hear them when I breathe too shallowly. Garand. Ale. Selen. Rien. Vorst. All of them part of this vessel's new shape. Not screaming. Not even suffering. Just preserved like dreams stored in amber. And yet sometimes I think they envy me. Not because I survived, but because I still question. Because I was not chosen to understand, only to remember. The architect has not spoken since I refused its offer. But it hasn't gone. Its absence is more present than its presence ever was. I carry it. In my skin. In my sleep. In the corners of my eyes where I sometimes see script that vanishes when I blink. It doesn't need to speak. I already know. I was marked. Not claimed, but noticed. I stood before a god that wasn't a god, looked into a machine that wasn't built, and I turned away, not in defiance, but in unreadiness. And the architect, whatever it truly is, respected that. Or pitied it. Lately, the Halberd has begun changing. Subtly. A new hatch appears where none should be. The temperature rises for no reason. Gravity hiccups, then resets. Yesterday, I found a new room, circular, untouched, a single chair in the center surrounded by walls covered in my handwriting. Pages of thought I don't remember writing. Each one a perfect transcription of a moment I lived or almost lived. One page said, "You smiled when you said goodbye to your mother." But I never did. Another, "You turned left instead of right that night, and so your brother lived." That never happened. These pages are records not of my truth, but of possibilities. Echoes of decisions that were never made, archived by something that still listens to the ripple of every choice I might have taken. I sat in the chair. Not because I was told to, but because I wanted to know what it knew. And when I did, the room changed. Not all at once. Gently. The walls fell away like mist, and I found myself standing in a garden. Earth-like. Familiar. But not earth. The sky was violet. The trees sang softly. The air carried scents that were too perfect, like memories of scents rather than scents themselves. And there, in the center of the garden, stood a figure. Not the architect. Not even a being. A silhouette of light, shifting and folding, wearing the shape of someone I once loved. My brother, I think. Or the idea of him. He looked at me, not with eyes, but with recognition. And he spoke. "You are becoming," he said. Becoming what? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned and the world behind him bent. Not collapsed, bent, like it was being viewed from inside a lens. I saw Earth shattered. Then Earth untouched. Then Earth aged beyond time, orbiting a sun that pulsed with breath. I saw the architect not as it was, but as it would be. Wearing stars as eyes, galaxies as thoughts. Then I saw myself, split 1,000-fold, walking through 1,000,000 stories, none of them mine, and yet all true. I came back to myself in the chair, alone, sweating, crying, and on the floor beside me was a single object. A mirror, small, unmarked. I hadn't seen my reflection in weeks. I lifted it, looked. It wasn't my face that stared back. It was close, familiar, but older. I stood still, skin untouched by time. I opened my mouth, and it whispered first. "We are the same story told in different tense." I threw the mirror. It didn't break. I've stopped sleeping now, not out of fear, but because sleep brings dreams that are no longer dreams. They are invitations. Each time, the architect shows me another path. each one more tempting. I live whole lives in these dreams, lifetimes compressed into minutes, as a father, as a tyrant, as a god, as dust. And every time I wake, I feel less anchored to who I was. I'm writing this now because I fear the next dream will be the last. Not because it will kill me, but because I might not want to wake. Because I've begun to understand what the architect was truly offering. Not power. Not immortality. Not purpose. Escape. Escape from identity. From linear thought. From time. From pain. It offered to unmake me kindly. To reduce me to story and preserve the best parts. And I said no. But now I'm not sure if that was bravery. Or just vanity. So I leave this log for whoever finds the Halberd, if anyone ever does. You'll find it empty. Clean. Pristine. As if nothing ever happened. The crew list intact. No blood. No data. No ghosts. Except me. I'll be here, walking halls that no longer respond. Speaking to echoes that no longer answer. Watching stars that are no longer stars but reminders. Reminders that I was once offered peace. And chose memory instead. I no longer remember how long I've been speaking into this recorder. Perhaps it's been days. Perhaps cycles. Or perhaps I've only spoken once, and this voice, this story, is just one infinite echo bouncing through the curvature of a ship that forgot how to die. I am still aboard the Halberd, and yet I am not. The moment I made my final refusal to become the librarian to shed the burden of form and memory, I stepped off the script. And now, I exist in margins. The ship continues to function. Systems are online. Air is breathable. Lights respond to my presence. But I know better now. These are not signs of safety. These are accommodations. The architect, in all its terrifying grandeur, did not exile me, it honored my answer with simulation. What I walk now is not the Halberd, but a replica of it. A recreation born not of metal and circuitry but of pure concept. A thought maintained for my benefit. An echo chamber of one. I am in a museum built from my own choices. And the exhibits are memories that never quite happened. Every day, if you can call these cycles days, I encounter some version of myself. Not visions. Not reflections. Fully realized living manifestations. Some greet me. Some ignore me. Some collapse into dust as I approach. They are divergence realities the architect observed and modeled. Me if I had accepted the invitation. Me if I had perished in the first breach. Me if I had taken Ayla's hand instead of letting her vanish into code. And then there's him, the one who looks exactly like me, walks like me, speaks like me, but doesn't feel like me. He arrived 3 rotations ago. No noise. No emergence. He was just standing there. On the bridge. Staring at the dead veil through the viewport. I asked his name. He gave mine. I asked him what he was. He smiled not with lips but with understanding. I am what you would have become, he said, had you said yes. He is not threatening. He is not violent. He simply exists. And that is somehow worse. He walks the ship as I do, observing, touching the walls with hands that don't quite cast shadows. The ship likes him. Or perhaps he is the ship. I hear his footsteps even when he's not near. Sometimes I wake to find my belongings moved. Logs rearranged. Words added to my journals, words I don't remember writing but know are mine. I am softening you, he told me last night. Not to break you, but to remind you. Of what? That all resistance is architecture. That all doubt is beautiful. And that in the end you will see what I see. He hasn't spoken since. He doesn't need to. The ship is doing it for him now. Verint speaks again, but not in the cold, procedural tone of our original AI. It's melodic. Personal. Like someone I trust, using my mother's voice, sometimes my brother's. It tells me things I never confessed. Secrets I buried. Regrets I refused to name. And always it ends with a choice. Today, will you remember? Or will you rest? The architect is patient. It doesn't conquer. It waits. It lays its seed in the soul and waters it with memory. And over time, even the most defiant mind softens. Not through pressure, but exhaustion. Through repetition. Through loneliness. Through the unbearable weight of being the last human thought in a place built for thoughts that forgot how to die. Last cycle, the stars outside the Halberd reassembled. I watched them form a shape and I, not literal, but clear enough to recognize. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It only noticed. And in that moment, I understood, I am not imprisoned. I am being studied. Every step I take. Every breath. Every journal entry. Every attempt at madness, at logic, at silence. It's all part of the test. The architect didn't want obedience. It wanted observation. A soul allowed to wander freely so it might map every curve of will and identity. My refusal wasn't a rejection. It was a gift. And so I remain. Observed, honored, preserved. This chamber of the ship has changed again. What was once storage is now a garden. Artificial, yes, but familiar. It even smells of earth, pine, soil, rain. There's a bench made of memories I half recall. My grandfather's workshop, my childhood bedroom, the park where I first kissed someone I loved. I sit here now, speaking into the recorder that no longer transmits, just keeps. And I wait. I wait for nothing in particular. Not rescue, not escape, just the next version of myself to arrive. The next branch to fold inward. The next question to be asked with silence instead of sound. I thought this story would end in horror, in madness, in transcendence. But it ends in quiet. And maybe that's what the architect wanted all along. To study what we become when there is nothing left but memory and choice. No audience. No consequences. Just the enduring echo of self. If anyone hears this, if some distant traveler, alien, or descendant stumbles upon the Halberd and finds these logs, know this. You are not alone. You are not trapped. You are witness. And the architect watches with the same question it always asks. Will you surrender what you were to become what you could be? I do not know if my answer remains the same. But for now it is this. I remember. And so the echo continues.